Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. This past weekend was the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 10. Almost 500 people competed despite, of course, it being holiday season and ranked battles releasing just a few days prior. This was a really fun tournament, and again, this is sort of the first, large online tournament since ranked battles released. So I think a lot of people are interested in what the metagame looks like. We always talk about the comparison between ranked and the tournament meta for Pokemon Pocket. Both have a lot of similarities, and yeah, I think we're going to be, discussing the results here as they pertain to ranked battles as well as next week, because next weekend is the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 11. We just keep coming. We just have more tournaments. This one's called Mega Marvel, I guess. I was running out of M words to pair with the word Mega, but $250 in the prize pool. It's crazy that we've already done 10 of these, and now we're on to the 11th tournament. But you know what? It is what it is. The ranked season will be over in 2 weeks, as well as, the new set is releasing. So we really only have a couple of weeks left of this metagame. 5 weeks in, things are kind of figured out. However, what we tend to see in these longer seasons is things sort of tend to recycle. And right now, we're definitely kind of in that phase. But anyway, go and register for Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 11. Again, $250 in the prize pool donated by a community member. Big shout out to them. It is Saturday, December 6th at noontime. Link to register down in the description below. Bit of a longer intro, but you know what? Let's dive into it. Here are the final results, the final standings from Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 10. Does this surprise you? This is what we're looking at right now. Suicune Greninja kind of dominating, but not like maybe as much as people might kind of think. It's definitely perhaps a little bit overblown. Cranfire, number 1 here in the standings, got first place from Spain, 12-2. He was playing Suicune EX and Greninja. This is going to be the version with only 1 Greninja EX and 2 Water Shuriken Greninja. Coincidentally, Mock, I don't know how to say his name, from Japan, actually got second place playing the exact same 20 card list. And yeah, that's the reality right now of the metagame. Everyone's going to complain. Everyone's going to be like, oh, we got to ban Greninja. Oh, we got to do something about it. Listen, okay, there's counterplay to this deck list. This is not going to be the same situation as it was, 2 months ago when we were in sort of that secluded spring season. In my mind, Suicune and Greninja is definitely one of the best decks in the game, but there are a lot of other options. And I think if you take a look at the overall metagame this weekend, what you'll see is a lot of people did play Suicune Greninja, but not that many people played decks that were strong against Suicune and Greninja. And that's just the reality of it. But kind of funny that the first and second place, and we'll get into the deck lists, but they were playing the exact same 20 card list here. Lazy Boy from the United States, 10-2, third place. He was playing Greninja EX and Suicune. And again, people are going to be like, okay, so basically Suicune again. But this deck list is very different. This is the version that is playing double Greninja EX and then 1 Water Shuriken. Oftentimes not playing Indeedee, but this deck was also, yeah, so not playing Indeedee, but I think the other 2 lists were. This deck list operates very differently. We'll get into it more once we kind of pull up the lists themselves, but big shout out to Lazy Boy. Greninja EX, which is a different deck than Suicune EX, got third place. And then in fourth place, Jack O'Kind from Austria, we do see 10-3 was playing Hydreigon. Hydreigon to me is sort of the high roll in the metagame right now. I think a lot of people have really dropped off Blaziken in favor of Hydreigon, and I think that's fair. However, we're seeing a lot of progression in the Hydreigon lists, at least in ranked. I think that the versions of this deck that people are playing are very different now. I think people are building Hydreigon and tailoring it specifically for this Suicune and Greninja matchup. We'll talk about that later. But he did get fourth place. Greninja and Oricorio. This is Marinara Man from the United States. Very interesting. We even had a Greninja and Oricorio also here from Jimbo Mancer at 8th place. So again, a very specific sort of counter meta deck for Suicune and Greninja. This is a deck that always does well into Suicune and Greninja, so no real surprise to me that a couple of them snuck in. These were actually the only 2, I think, Greninja EX and Oricorios that made it into day 2, and they both made it into top 8, which is very impressive. And this is specifically a deck very good into Suicune and Greninja. And we did see Imp Brendan from France playing Blaziken, EX, and Heatmore. And I just think Blaziken is a good deck list. I think that it's specifically strong. It's a high roll deck. You can win, you can lose against basically anything. And no surprise to me that, one of them was also in top 8. Crollo from Chile, another Greninja EX and Suicune EX here in 6th place. And that's really your top 8. It's Suicune, Greninja and Suicune, Greninja Oricorio, and then 1 Hydreigon, and then 1 Mega Blaziken. Both of these decks are kind of functioning similarly. in the metagame as like true high roll options. And if we go down here, we kind of just see a lot more Suicune Greninja, more Hydreigon. These were the most common decks. But if we go down here to number 15th place, Miss Pinguigo. I don't know how to say the name either. A great player, by the way. A lot of these players are constantly topping the tournaments. These are some of the best players in all of Pokemon Pocket. Anybody that kind of discusses luck being a factor in Pokemon Pocket, you're not wrong, but we end up seeing the same players at the top of the standings every week. So clearly skill is involved to some extent, but shout out to all of these players. But Miss Ping here from Argentina was playing Magnezone Oricorio, another deck really specifically strong into Suicune Greninja, however, struggles heavily into Hydreigon. And that's probably a big reason why people maybe have swapped from Blaziken to Hydreigon. But anyway, Magnezone Oricorio here in 15th place, and another one here, Lico Unite from Venezuela at 17th place. And in between them was Arn, 777 from Germany. And he was playing the Absol Chingling Nihilego Poison version, which is also one of my favorite decks here, getting 16th place, so squeezing into top 16. Altaria all the way down at 18th place. So yeah, that's going to be sort of the biggest discussion this week is, what happened to Altaria. Definitely a deck that struggled. We see an Altaria Indeedee here, 8-2. This is Aurora Alpha from France, 18th place here, but that's the only Mega Altaria until we go all the way down here to 31st place, and that's going to be Easy as Exart, I don't know how to say the name, from Malaysia. 7-3, also playing Altaria. And that's kind of it. I mean, the metagame is becoming very, very condensed, and people are going to complain, but we had a good run. Listen, it doesn't matter how good of a metagame is. When it goes 5, 6, 7 weeks, things are going to get figured out, and they're going to get more condensed as time goes on. And by condensed, I mean the variety of decks that you see are going to be limited. I know some people are a little bit disappointed in this ranked season because things are so condensed. You're seeing the same 3, 4, 5 decks all throughout ranked, but, to be fair, we have the card pool. We've had it for over a month now, and I think people just understand what the best cards are, and some things are changing very slightly, but for the most part, right, I mean, things have been figured out. So it's not a bad thing. It's just the reality of Pokemon Pocket and any TCG that, doesn't necessarily have, a quick turnaround. And we have to wait a couple more weeks for the new set to come out. Things will shake up and new decks will come out. And then, 2 or 3 weeks into that season, things will start to get figured out. And that's just the way it goes week after week. But anyway, final standings. Big shout out to all of these players here. Nothing too surprising. We did see a Crobat list here in 30th place. This is Sudeep from India. And everything else in here is fairly standard. One Decidueye down here at 57th place. We even see a Jolteon here, which is Valden, great player. Right below Momo, Frog EX players from in 61st place from France. So anyway, that's kind of it. This is the standings that we're looking at. Altaria did struggle. We'll get into a lot of that metadata, win rates, matchups, all of that stuff at the end of the video. But let's just dive into the deck list now. This is the part that we always take very long to get into, but I know most people are just going to kind of probably skip ahead to the deck list. So anyway, let's dive right into it. Let's take a look at Cran's deck here, the first place deck of the tournament. It is the exact same as Mokmok's deck, so keep that in mind. But anyway, I don't know if that's ever happened, by the way, but this exact 20 card list was played by both players in the grand finals, and that's not too big of a surprise. This is actually probably the most common build right now for Suicune and Greninja is how I'm gonna categorize this deck, because Suicune is the primary Pokemon. It is the primary attacker. When you're playing double Greninja EX, oftentimes Suicune isn't the primary attacker, and we're only playing 4 basic Pokemon. So you would just more rather consistently, use Greninja EX. It has more HP, can free retreat, and it does 100 damage no matter how many Pokemon are on the bench. But this deck list here is more of the classic version. And this is the new progression, I would say, of Suicune and Greninja, which is replacing that Giratina with Indeedee. One thing that I did end up realizing after playing a bunch of games with double Greninja EX was that, Suicune and Greninja really does kind of rely on that 5th basic Pokemon to continually deal enough damage to put a lot of pressure on your opponent. A lot of people ask me, is it worth it to play Giratina? And I think the answer to that throughout the season was, well, maybe. I think it's just nice to have a 5th basic Pokemon. And what Pokemon are we going to play in place of Giratina? And I think at this point, most people have decided that Indeedee is kind of just the better Pokemon. Somebody said that Suicune has it in with the Psychic Mafia. That was a comment a couple of days or weeks ago. And I think that's correct. It's funny, we went from Giratina, to Indeedee. And I think it's just a more useful card. It's a little bit less useful, like in terms of it doesn't attack. So if you lead off with it, it doesn't ever really do anything. You're going to basically go down in energy. And that's the downside to Indeedee, is that we're playing 5 basic Pokemon. 2 of them we don't really mind leading off with. I guess Froakie we don't mind leading off with. We would rather lead Suicune, but Indeedee does make your lead off a little bit less consistent, but it does provide a ton of value in terms of just healing for 20 damage every turn. It's specifically really good into Chingling, so it nullifies any of the pressure that the 10 damage Chingling provides does, because Chingling is something that can kind of turn off Suicune and Greninja. And the other thing to mention is that we saw a lot of Frogadier in the deck. I don't really love Frogadier in the deck at all. I don't really feel like it's helpful. If our opponent ends up Chingling locking us, we just kind of bench Indeedee and we just sit there forever. The only downside to that specifically is if we get Mars, or if we lead off with Froakie and we go first. Like, that can be difficult because then we have to wait like 3 or 4 turns to KO the Chingling, which can be annoying for sure. But in general, I'm a pretty big fan. I'm a pretty big fan of Suicune and Greninja right now, even without Frogadier. I think it is probably just the strongest deck in the game. You know, we still have turn 2 Water Shark and Cyrus combo. We have Suicune lead going second. We have Greninja EX to pivot if we need to. It's kind of got everything going for it, and this is just a very standard build. 1 Irida, 1 Mars, 1 Copycat, 1 Giant Cape, and double Cyrus. We'll take a look at the double Greninja EX deck because it does play the deck very differently, and it just functions very differently, but this is more of kind of the newer version of a classic Suicune and Greninja deck, which has been buffed. I keep hitting the space button, which goes to the search thing here. I apologize for doing that, but yeah, this is classic Suicune and Greninja. And the reason why you would play this above probably playing, double Greninja EX is that it's a lot more consistent into different Oricorio matchups. I think that the win rate difference between this deck and double Greninja EX when you play against Magnezone is about a 15% difference, which does matter quite a bit. And I think in the mirror matchup, they're both fairly equal, but in general, I think this deck kind of has a better win rate against some of the other more common decks in the game, maybe other than Hydreigon, I'm not sure. Or Altaria, I forget. But Altaria wasn't really a big factor here. So this is just a really good deck. That's all I have to say about it. It's got a little bit of everything. It's not the most consistent deck in the world out there, but oftentimes decks that win tournaments are not really the most consistent decks. They are the most powerful decks, and I would kind of consider this to be one of the most, if not the most powerful deck out there. It's got a little bit of a high roll to it, but it's downside. It's worse. Like, whenever this deck is functioning absolutely worse than anything else, it is still very powerful in the mid game, right? So sometimes it takes a little bit to get going, but it's always strong in the mid to late game, but sometimes really strong in the early game. So it's got a little bit of a high roll aspect to it. But yeah, that's effectively, this is the deck that won, also the deck that got second place. So shout out to Crownfire. I would recommend this. I think it's probably, in general, the best deck in the game. Now, that doesn't mean that it beats everything. It's just that, we have to really counterplay Suicune and Greninja. That's where we're at right now. We have to counterplay Suicune and Greninja. And keep in mind, because Suicune is the primary attacker for this deck, if we go back here, because Suicune is the primary attacker in this deck, the same type of things that would beat Suicune before, being, these big, stage 2 Pokemon that can sit alone in the active spot, like Decidueye, like Blaziken, even for that matter. These are decks that actually do quite well into this matchup, whereas Greninja EX, doesn't care about, if you have Pokemon on the bench or not. So Decidueye still going to be good. Magnezone or Oricorio still going to be good here, and I think Blaziken actually does fairly well into this deck as well. So that's the other thing to keep in mind here for sure. There is counterplay to this deck. It's just none of that counterplay was very common. And because the other Greninja deck functions very differently, it was kind of hard to counter both of them at the same time. We're going to skip over Mach's deck here because he did play the exact same deck and got second place. So in the timestamps, I'll just let you know that this was the first and second place deck. But anyway, if we skip to iLazyBoy, the third place deck, which is Greninja and Suicune, now you guys maybe will understand what I'm talking about. This is a deck that only plays 4 basic Pokemon. We are playing 1 Frogadier in here. Personally, I think that it's probably worth playing Frogadier just because we're not playing Indeedee, so the Chingling lock can feel not great, for sure. Like, we can't just infinitely heal, but we do have double Giant Cape and double Irida. So even though we're not playing Indeedee, we're playing a ton of healing and a ton of extra HP boosting, right, with double Giant Cape. So effectively, the Chingling lock functions very similarly here, where it's like we would rather lead Suicune, but with Giant Capes with Irida, that damage from Chingling never really ends up mattering. But I really like this deck. I thought this deck was absolutely incredible. It's very concise. It's very consistent. And the reason why I liked this deck, especially early on in the ranked season, was because I knew everybody would be playing both Hydreigon, Absol, and Altaria. And this is a deck list that beats both of those matchups very, very, very easily. And it's very consistent because, again, Greninja EX is our primary attacking option most of the time, whether we go first or second. What we can do is actually commit energy to like a benched Froakie because we know that we're going to be able to just free retreat the Suicune or whatever out of the active spot and then just attack turn 2 or turn 3 with Greninja anyway. And that is a really big benefit because sometimes if you go first and you lead Suicune, especially when Suicune is your primary attacking option, you kind of are just forced to commit energies to it and hope that it all works out. The other deck can get around that by stalling early game with like a Greninja Cyrus ping, you know, stall combo. But this deck just kind of commits energies to the bench and says, you know what, you can attack my active Suicune because I'm not going to use it anyway. And then later in the game, you can force out a Cyrus and then maybe be ahead in some scenarios. But Giant Cape Greninja EX is 190 HP plus Irida. It's kind of difficult to 2-hit KO this Pokemon, I'll tell you what, and it's virtually impossible to 1-hit KO it. And that's the big upside here. We can basically guarantee that we're going to live a hit from Blaziken or Altaria or Hydreigon, and then basically 2-hit KO. And against Mega Pokemon, it just ends up being really broken because we're living an attack kind of no matter what. And that's a really, really big deal. Blaziken especially, and Altaria, because they like to play the Rocky Helmet combo. Being above that 150, 160 HP threshold is really, really important, and I think that's where Greninja EX shines. But keep in mind, this is a deck that does not love Oricorio, because our only option to KO Oricorio is going to be this one single Water Shuriken Greninja. So if Oricorio is becoming a little bit more popular, or this new Hydreigon list, which we'll talk about later, becomes more common, I think this build is probably going to fall to the wayside just a little bit. Very, very good, a little bit more consistent, but a little bit less high rolly, very less high rolly, I would say. We are still playing one Water Shuriken Greninja, but this is also a deck that's not even playing Copycat. We're playing one Mars, one Cyrus, double Irida, double Cape, and a Frogadier. You could cut the Frogadier for a Copycat if you're not worried about Chingling, but this is a deck that does not love Chingling particularly. And yeah, that's really it. So both decks function very differently, and I think their matchup spreads are different. It's definitely nuanced. If you don't have a lot of experience playing with or against these two decks, you would know, or I guess you wouldn't know, that they operate very differently, but they do. They really do. Jackokine, the fourth place deck of the tournament, and this is Hydreigon and Absol. Now, keep in mind, this is double Chingling Hydreigon, and this is not something we often see. In fact, a lot of Hydreigon Absol decks aren't even playing Chingling. They're actually just playing maybe one Leap over Absol. So this deck list said, hey, you know what? I'm not even going to play Leap over Absol. I am just going to lean into the Chingling lock here, and I'm going to hope I hit opponents that maybe, you know, don't play Greninja or anything like that, or Frogadier. But what's interesting with Chingling in this deck list is that we're not playing any hand disruption, which typically pairs very well with Chingling, right? You'd play Mars, you'd play, you know, a red card. That way, after the Chingling lock and a Suicune for a couple of turns, you can Mars or red card them, and then you're off to the races. So it's an interesting deck. Even though this is the highest placing Hydreigon deck, I don't know how much how confident I am in the list. But one thing stands out to me here, and that is going to be the Pokemon Center Lady. And I think this is massively underrated because, and the reason I say this is because Hydreigon has 150 HP. And when we use Roar in Unison, we take 30 damage. Now, if we Roar in Unison and we Pokemon Center Lady before we attack, we're effectively doing 130 damage and then sitting there with 150 HP, which means that if our opponent can't hit us for 120 damage, or more, then we can actually Roar in Unison again and get a second attack off. And let me tell you something, if Hydreigon gets 2 attacks off on you, it's going to be difficult to win the game, because at that point, maybe they have Mega Absol set up, or maybe they have a second Hydreigon ready to go. Believe me, you do not want to get attacked twice by the same Hydreigon. And I think that the meta right now, with Hydreigon at least, is shifting towards that particular playstyle, because Suicune and Greninja struggles to hit for that 120 damage mark if they don't have Water Shuriken Greninja. So keep that in mind. This deck is playing one Pokemon Center Lady, but we are seeing Indeedee see some play with Hydreigon for the same reason. In fact, we're even seeing Giant Capes in place of Rocky Helmet, because again, the Rocky Helmets are nice specifically because Absol is a weak little boy and he doesn't do enough damage, and definitely relies on Hydreigon to deal damage. But most of the time, this deck isn't 1-hit KOing Pokemon, right? I mean, technically, Rocky Helmet Hydreigon, you can 1-hit KO a Suicune, or effectively 1-hit KO a Suicune, but I think that Rocky Helmets might be on the out for this list specifically. So the meta is actually changing pretty quick as far as it pertains to Hydreigon. If you've been playing ranked, you know what I'm talking about. But keep in mind, this list here, even though it was the 4th place list of the tournament, might be a little bit outdated already, because the Hydreigon progression that we saw over the weekend in ranked, it's hard to explain. But to be fair, things are changing in ranked as the tournament goes on, which doesn't always happen, but it does happen because the tournament, people submit their deck list like on Friday or whatever, and then they're locked in for the entire weekend. Whereas, you know, some meta progressions and deck lists actually change during the tournament, and we don't actually see that reflected, whereas like a tournament next weekend, you might be seeing very different Hydreigon decks. So the meta is developing. It's just hard to really see it on a week-by-week basis, because sometimes things happen, you know, during the weekends or in the middle of the week. So that progression that I just mentioned to you, you might have to wait until next weekend to see that into effect, or see results from tournaments mid this week, or play ranked right now. Marinara Man from the United States was playing Greninja and Oricorio. This is sort of an interesting progression. This is going to be, I believe he was playing only Lightning Energies. Yeah. So this is going to be an only Lightning Energy Oricorio Zero Aura deck with Greninja thrown in. And this is a really smart deck in a metagame heavily dominated by Suicune and Greninja. Okay, that's the reality of it. Oricorio shuts down Greninja EX and Suicune. Zero Aura is an aggro attacker, which can be very useful hitting for weakness on those water-type Pokemon, KOing Froakies and things like that. But it's also a decent amount of damage just in general. The funniest interaction that I saw all weekend with this deck list was that Zero Aura with 90 HP lives an attack from Absol. That is hilarious. Shout out to Absol. Can't even KO a Zero Aura. And that's really important, to be fair, in a lot of those matchups, right? The fact that you can get 2 attacks off in an Absol's face with Zero Aura is hilarious, simply by the fact that you have 90 HP, or Oricorio, which Absol can't even attack. And yeah, double Greninja, double Cyrus, and it's just a really strong control type deck, and I think it's a good alternate option for Magnezone, which is, you know, definitely not a bad deck, but it's a less aggressive deck than playing like this double Zero Aura variant. And you might be like, well, we're not even playing E-Switch. Like, why are we playing Zero Aura? It's literally just there to attack. Like, that's all it does. It's, if you're going first, it's a good option, and it's just another attacker that we don't necessarily have to set up. And keep in mind, this deck is only playing Lightning Energy, so the only Pokemon we're attacking with are Oricorio and Zero Aura. Both deal 50 damage. You'd rather just have the free energy on one of your attackers, right? That's the whole concept here. One Giant K, one Pokemon Center Lady, double Copycat, double Copycat. Again, sort of counter to Suicune and Greninja, and that's really what it's all about. A really, really fun deck list. Let's take a look here. Let's skip down to Brendan's deck because we already took a look at Greninja and Suicune. Let's take a look at the highest placing Blaziken deck here of the tournament. Nothing too surprising here. I'll be honest. It's Suicune. It's not Suicune. It's Blaziken and Heatmore. The same kind of deck that we saw from time to time. You know, an underrated deck. And I think that this is definitely not a bad deck list. It is a rare candy deck. Sometimes you don't get Blaziken out. That feels bad. You know, Chingling is annoying as well for this type of deck, but it's basically the same thing as Hydreigon, but a little bit better in some ways, a little bit worse in other ways. And that's just really what it comes down to. And I think it comes down to breakpoints, right? If like the most common Pokemon in the game are only hitting for upwards of 100 damage, Hydreigon feels pretty good because, you know, you can attack twice and then it's broken. Whereas like with Blaziken, it's really nice if commonly Pokemon are hitting for 130, like Altaria and things like that, because Blaziken's just living no matter what. And then you get the first attack off and the game's over. So that's the advantage of Mega Blaziken. The metagame this weekend wasn't as kind to something like this as maybe it was Hydreigon, but this is still a quality deck. One thing that I'm really looking for rather as we move forward is Lily. I think Lily is one of the more uniquely well-positioned cards in the game, and I think it gives Blaziken a massive advantage that really no other deck has, which is just a big boy. He's just a big guy, 210 HP, you know, and you can use Lily because it's a stage 2 Pokemon. And I think that's an advantage that we have to kind of think of a little bit more seriously, especially with Hydreigon everywhere, Suicune Greninja hitting for like 100, 120 damage with weakness. Like maybe we play double Lily and like maybe we just consistently like can take 2 hits and that's our win condition. I don't know. I mentioned it on stream, but it is sort of one of the few advantages that Mega Blaziken has right now, is that you can use Lily. And that's kind of crazy. So maybe that ends up being relevant. Who knows? That's for the smarter people to figure out. If we go down here to Miss Ping in 15th place, this is going to be the highest placing Magnezone deck. Now, I did predict, or I didn't predict, but I said I kind of expect Magnezone to win just because like 40% of day 2 was Suicune and Greninja to some extent. What we saw, unfortunately, and I think it happened to Miss Ping, was that they just lost a best of 3 set to Suicune and Greninja, which definitely can happen. Best of 3 should be more consistent. This is definitely like a 30, I think it's like a 33% win rate or so for Suicune and Greninja. So it's not a great win rate. This is definitely still a deck that's strong into Suicune and Greninja. However, it definitely can lose. And unfortunately, we did see that. So not that many Magnezones saw play in day 2, but enough to where maybe you would expect some to, like make it far into the tournament. But I think we just kind of saw the Suicune, or not the Suicune, but the Greninja and Oricorio decks sort of, you know, find their way up there in the standings. They just didn't have enough oomph to get beyond the Hydreigon decks. And honestly, that's kind of my recommendation because it's really difficult for a lot of these Oricorio decks to get enough steam here to make it far into bracket when there's just a bunch of Hydreigon floating around. And that's sort of the rock, paper, scissors that we see right now between, you know, Magnezone, Suicune, and Hydreigon. Hydreigon just mops Magnezone and Oricorio, obviously, but it typically loses to Suicune and Greninja. So to be fair, my recommendation would be to build Hydreigon so that you can beat Suicune specifically, or stop playing Hydreigon, because if you're not being Suicune and Greninja right now, you're not helping the meta at all, and you're not moving things forward. So that's my recommendation. Play something that you feel confident into Suicune and Greninja with. That would be my biggest recommendation right now. Let's go down here to Arn in 16th place, and he was playing, of course, Absol and Chingling with Nihiligo, one leap over Absol as well, double poison barb. This is a really fun deck here. One of my favorites in the entire game, one Mars, one red card. This is a deck that literally gets the Chingling locked down. You attach the poison barb, and then you say, listen, we're going to wait. We're going to wait. I'm going to Mars you. I'm going to red card you. If you attack me, sure, you're going to probably KO my Chingling, but the poison barb comes in. I even have a second Chingling to keep the lock going. By then, you're going to get down and low enough to where Mega Absol can kind of KO you, and, it's this and that, and then the game's over. That's the general strategy here. But this is definitely not a deck that loves playing against, double Irida, double Giant Cape, double Greninja EX. Clearly, just because you're never really able to do anything, because they're just sort of pivoting, they're free retreating, they're getting rid of poison, they're healing, 3 Pokemon for 40 damage. It doesn't work out very well. Mega Absol, of course, doesn't deal a ton of damage, and you might be looking at this deck thinking, well, how are we getting KOs? Because nothing here is really doing that much damage. You are very reliant on the Nihiligo poison barb damage ticking down. But sometimes that doesn't do anything, and that's the thing, right? You're reliant on that damage strategy. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, specifically against Greninja EX, as we saw Arn lose in top 16 here to the Greninja, because trust me, that matchup was not very, very good for him. But that's kind of it. There's some other decks here. There's Altaria at 18th place and Crobat here in 30th. We're going to leave these other decks probably to be featured in the video later this week, where we kind of do our off meta showcase, or, the decks that necessarily weren't super popular, but did do kind of well in tournaments, not only ours, but other tournaments. So we'll leave them for later in the week to talk about them. But that's the metagame right now. Everything I just described to you is kind of what's going on. And it's very interesting. It really is. I know some people are going to, it's hard because for me, I look at things, right? And I say, oh, look at this little detail. Look at this change. Look at this progression. I find this stuff interesting, but I'm sure 50% of people are going to watch this video and say, Suicune Greninja 1, that sucks. I don't care. Game's horrible, and I don't want to play it, right? That's what the reaction for a lot of people is going to be. But those are people that, I don't know what else to tell you. I just don't. I don't know what else to say to you guys. But yeah, man, that's what's going on. So my recommendation right now, and again, I'm sure everybody understands, is that they should be playing something that beats Suicune and Greninja. Now, what beats Suicune and Greninja? We'll have to talk about that. Let's dive in here to the metagame tab, the final portion of the video, where we go into, all of the intricate, data and details that provide a lot of context that not everybody watches. But I've sort of I've gaslit people into thinking this is an important part of the video, because it is. So let's dive right into it. Shout out to everybody that is still here. And this is going to be the metagame tab. So you will notice that Mega Altaria was technically the most played deck of the tournament. However, a 44.5% win rate, 161 to 196. Altaria struggled. It really did. And again, it's tough because this was what the metagame was built around when Ranked came out, right? Everybody was like, play Altaria. And I told people, play Altaria. What did they do? They played Altaria and they did really well. And then eventually everybody was like, we need to beat Altaria. So we're on the tail end of that sort of spectrum. And again, things cycle through, right? As we're kind of seeing now into the 5th week. So Altaria, heavily counterplayed right now. Suicune and Greninja really the top dog, and we need to do something about it. Greninja EX and Suicune actually didn't do that well. A 52% win rate, 196 to 173 is respectable. Hydreigon, 49% total win rate here, the 3rd most played deck of the tournament at 13% meta share. It did win the week prior, so I think that's probably a big reason why a lot of people played Hydreigon. But as we see here, Suicune and Greninja, which is the double water shuriken version, only 9% of the meta share played it, but it went 176 to 120. That's a 58.5% win rate. Very, very, very good win rate for this deck. Absolutely dominant. But Magnezone, look at this. Only 40 people played it, only 8% of the meta, which is not a lot. But it also had a 56% win rate, 134 to 103. So I am very, I believe heavily in Magnezone. I really do. I think that it's definitely still the sort of the main counter meta deck for sure. Blaziken struggled a little bit. Decidueye kind of, did all right. Basically a 50-50 record. Greninja and Absol about a 50% record. Crobat had a 50% record. Naganadel did really well, although only 8 people played it. So like 24 and 17, this is a small sample size. We really can't derive too much information from really any of this. We can filter by win rate and we'll see some standouts. And the biggest standout to me today or this weekend really is the Greninja Zero or Greninja Oricorio. These are specific decks that just did well into Suicune. In fact, if we go to the matchups here, we see that their most common matchup was against Greninja EX and Suicune, and they went 8-0. So that's kind of the main reason why it did very well. Nothing else it played even it saw nearly as much. In fact, it went 50-50 into Hydreigon, which is kind of impressive. Kind of did decent against really everything else. So I think this is potentially a really, really strong deck. Could rise up, although I'm not super confident in this deck's ability to maybe handle things like Hydreigon, for an example. I guess it went 2-2, but I don't believe in it really that much against Hydreigon. But that's the big standout for sure in terms of like off meta decks that kind of popped off. And like I said, we saw 2 of these in top 16, which is pretty, or top 8 even, which is impressive for sure. Let's go ahead and take a look at the day 2 metagame, and the conversion rates are going to surprise you pretty heavily because if we take a look here, Altaria was 14.5% meta share in day 2, negative. Look at that, -4. It went -4 for the tournament here, down to a 10% meta share in day 2. So that is abysmal. Like, that is really rough. Only 9 Mega Altaria in day 2 for being the most popular deck of the tournament. But as we see here, look at this, 19% for Suicune, Greninja, and Suicune, which is crazy. So 40% of the tournament was playing Suicune. One of them did a lot better than the other. That is going to be Greninja EX. And again, unfortunately for some of the Oricorio decks, they just got beat here in bracket. Like, by the way, if we take a look at Cranfire, we'll see that he did beat a Greninja Oricorio right here. But that was the only Oricorio he hit all tournament, which is crazy. His only losses were to like the mirror matchup twice. And then if we go to, where was it, Mach. Let me find him here. Like if we go over to Mach, we'll see that his matchups here, he beat a Magnezone Oricorio, right? So like you got to get lucky. There's definitely a timeline where like Magnezone Oricorio or any of these players just hit more Magnezones, but just not enough people played Magnezone. And like that's the story. Like if anyone's curious of like, oh, how did Suicune win? They won because enough people played Suicune to where somebody either got lucky and just beat Magnezone, or they just didn't play Magnezone or Oricorio at all. And that's kind of what we're seeing. Both players only hit Oricorio once all tournament, and they ended up winning both of those matchups, right? And then they made it to finals. Like that's how it happens. So realistically, we just need either more people to play Oricorio, whether that's Magnezone or Greninja Oricorio, or you need to kind of change Hydreigon to be a little bit more specifically well built into Suicune and Greninja. So that's my recommendation, particularly. But back to the metagame tab and the day 2 meta share, as we see, Hydreigon did very well. Magnezone about 50-50. Altaria struggled, and nothing else here very relevant, I will be honest. Other than if we go to, the Greninja Oricorios, who both went 8-2, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean, that's effectively it here. If we go to the metagame tab, I do want to take a look at the matchup spreads for specifically Greninja or Suicune and Greninja, because this is what most people are going to play. Like moving forward, like this is kind of the top dog, right? So let's take a look at the matchups here and we'll break this down. So, yeah, 65 or 64% win rate into Hydreigon Absol, okay? So clearly speaking, at least the way that we're playing Hydreigon right now is probably not the best way to play it, or we just should not be playing it at all. I know people like Hydreigon, but you're losing to Suicune, and that's not really helping anything. About 50-50 or a little over 50-50, 27 and 24 into Greninja EX, so that's something, 50-50 into itself. And look at this. 24 and 13 into Altaria. So Altaria, Hydreigon, these are not good decks into Suicune. Okay, so they're not doing very well. Something has to change specifically. 10 and 20 though into Magnezone, so a 33% win rate. So Magnezone definitely still doing its job. And look at this, 13 and 2 into Blaziken. So a lot of the most popular decks that people are playing are losing to Suicune and Greninja. So we have to look inward. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, if I'm hating on Suicune, why am I playing something that just gets farmed by Suicune, right? And no disrespect, but like, you got to understand, if you're going to hate on a deck, you got to at least try to counterplay it a little bit. You know what I mean? That's where we're at. People forget, right? They're like, oh, like Suicune Greninja hasn't won anything recently. I don't have to worry about it. And then bang, it dominates the tournament, right? So it's still a top dog. We have to counterplay it. We have to keep it in mind. 8-2 against Crobat, and obviously not a good matchup there. Altaria, Jirachi, 3-1, obviously not a good matchup there as well. We can filter by the lowest win rate, and we see that it was 0-1 against Greninja Zero, or it was 10-20 against Magnezone, 1-2 here against Greninja Oricorio. So other than the few decks that counterplay it, which it didn't see very often, it literally had above a 50% win rate against everything else in the tournament. So yeah, we need to we need to get on that. Even 50-50 in a Decidueye, which is crazy because literally only one Decidueye matchup in a Suicune and Greninja happened all tournament, which is hilarious. I mean, you know, Decidueye is not a bad deck. It's just nobody really played it. Yeah, man, the data here is absolutely staggering. It really is. I think honestly, people just forgot. They just forgot. They forgot about the kid. They counted him out and they got farmed. And that's what the meta is all about. You know, you can't forget about something like Suicune and Greninja. You know what I mean? You just can't. So yeah, that's where we're at. You know, I'll try to give an example of a new Hydreigon list that I think is well built for Suicune and Greninja, because I think that's important. But 35 minutes into this video, we got to wrap it up. This is Meta Monday number whatever. I forget how many Meta Mondays we've done now, but it's probably like in the 40s. We've done a lot of Meta Mondays. We've been doing it for like over a year now, or almost a year. But anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for playing. And don't forget to register for Pocket Meds number 11, PMPT number 11 this weekend, Saturday at noon. Trust me, you're not doing nothing on December 6th. Trust me, you're playing in Pocket Meds. That's what you're doing. I'm just kidding. But if you're available, definitely go and register. Link down in the description below. Stay tuned for the videos this week and the progression of the metagame. And good luck with your ranked grind, for sure. Hopefully that's going well for you guys. I need to pick it up because I haven't played much ranked in the last couple of days. But anyway, let's get out of here, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.